The streetlights flickered on Peachtree Avenue, casting long shadows across the cracked sidewalk where Angela Harris stood, her breath catching in her throat. Her phone trembled in her hand, the screen glowing with a grainy video that had gone viral in hours. The footage was shaky, captured by someone in a passing car, but the sound was unmistakable. Her daughter Kiana's voice, high-pitched and desperate, screaming, "Mama, help me." Red and blue lights pulsed in the background, and the silhouettes of two police officers loomed over a crumpled figure on the ground. Angela's knees buckled, but she didn't fall, not yet. She couldn't. Not when her baby girl was lying in a hospital bed, fighting for her life. Angela was a nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital, known for her steady hands and warm smile, the kind that put patients at ease even on their worst days. She'd worked the night shift for 12 years, raising Kiana alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Atlanta's West End. Kiana was 17, a senior at Booker T. Washington High, with a 3.8 GPA and dreams of becoming a civil rights lawyer. She'd inherited her mother's fire, her quick laugh, and her unyielding sense of justice. Angela had taught her to walk tall, to know her worth in a world that often tried to diminish it. But nothing could have prepared Angela for this. It was a Thursday night, humid and heavy, the kind of Georgia evening where the air clung to your skin. Kiana had texted Angela at 7:30 p.m., leaving study group, home soon. Love you, Mama. Angela was in the middle of her shift, checking vitals in the ear, when her phone buzzed again at 9:15 p.m. It wasn't Kiana this time, it was her best friend, Tasha, frantic. "Ms. Angela, you gotta come quick. It's Kiana. The police, they hurt her bad. She's at the hospital." Angela's heart stopped. She didn't ask questions. She grabbed her bag, told her supervisor she had an emergency, and ran to her car. The drive to Emory University Hospital was a blur. Angela's hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing. Kiana was careful, always careful. She knew the rules Angela had drilled into her since she was old enough to walk home alone. Keep your hands visible, don't argue with cops. Call me if anything feels wrong. What had happened? The radio was off, but Angela could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. She prayed, the words spilling out in a whisper, "Lord, please, not my baby, not my Kiana." At the hospital, there was chaos, beeping monitors, nurses shouting orders, the sharp smell of antiseptic. Angela pushed through the double doors, her scrubs wrinkled from the shift she'd abandoned. A doctor, young and frazzled, met her at the desk. "Ms. Harris, your daughter's in critical condition. She has a head injury, multiple contusions, and a fractured arm. She's stable, but we're monitoring her closely." Angela's mouth went dry. "Can I see her?" she managed to ask. The doctor nodded and led her to a curtained-off bed in the ICU. Kiana lay there, her face swollen, a breathing tube taped to her mouth. Her braids, usually neat and tight, were matted with blood. Angela sank into the chair beside her, taking Kiana's hand, careful not to disturb the fur-lines. "I'm here, baby," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're gonna be okay. Mama's got you." But Kiana didn't stir. The machines beeped steadily, a cold reminder of how fragile this moment was. Tasha arrived soon after, her eyes red and puffy. She was a petite girl, barely 16, wearing Kiana's old debate team hoodie. "Ms. Angela, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "We were walking home from the library. Kiana was just talking, laughing. Then this cop car pulled up. They said she looked suspicious, asked for her ID. She gave it to them, but they kept pushing her, saying she was resisting. She wasn't, I swear. Then one of them grabbed her, and she fell, and they kept going." Tasha's voice broke. Someone recorded it. "It's all over the internet." Angela's stomach churned. She pulled out her phone and opened the video Tasha had sent. It was only 42 seconds long, but each frame burned into her mind. Kiana stood under a streetlight, her backpack slung over one shoulder, holding out her ID. One officer, a stocky man with a buzz cut, yelled something inaudible. Kiana's hands were up, her voice pleading, "I'm not doing anything wrong." Then the second officer, taller, with a bald head, grabbed her arm, twisting it. Kiana stumbled, and the first officer shoved her to the ground. Her head hit the pavement with a sickening crack. The video cut off as the bystanders shouted, "Yo, stop!" Angela watched it again, then again, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. She wanted to scream, to run to the police station and demand answers, but she couldn't leave Kiana's side. Instead, she called her brother, Malik, a mechanic who lived across town. "Angie, I'm coming," he said, his voice tight with anger. "You need me, I'm there." By midnight, Malik was at the hospital with his wife, Denise, and their pastor, Reverend Carter. The small ICU waiting room filled with familiar faces, neighbors, Kiana's teachers, members of their church. They brought coffee, prayers, and quiet strength, but Angela felt like she was drowning. At 2 a.m., two police officers arrived, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. The older one, a white man with graying hair, introduced himself as Sergeant Reynolds. "Ms. Harris, we're here to take your statement about the incident," he said, his tone clipped. Angela stood, her arms crossed, her eyes burning. "My statement? My daughter's in a coma because of your people. You tell me what happened." Reynolds shifted, glancing at his partner. "Ma'am, your daughter resisted arrest. She became aggressive, and the officers acted to protect themselves." Angela's blood boiled. "Resisted? She was walking home. You saw the video. She had her hands up. The younger officer, a black man who avoided her gaze, handed her a form. "We need you to sign this, confirming we spoke." Angela stared at the paper, her vision blurring with tears. "I'm not signing anything until I know why my daughter's fighting for her life." Reynolds sighed, as if she were an inconvenience. "We'll be in touch," he said, and they left. Angela sank back into the chair, her hands covering her face. Denise knelt beside her, squeezing her shoulder. "We're gonna fight this, Angie. They can't do this and walk away." By morning, the hospital room was a shrine of support. Flowers, cards, and a teddy bear from Kiana's debate coach sat on the windowsill. Angela hadn't slept, her eyes fixed on Kiana's chest rising and falling with the ventilator. Her phone buzzed constantly, texts from co-workers, news alerts, and messages from strangers who'd seen the video. A local activist group, Justice Now, reached out, offering to organize a protest. Angela didn't respond. She wasn't ready for that, not yet. All she could think about was Kiana waking up, smiling, telling her about her day like she always did. But the video kept spreading. By noon, it had 500,000 views on Twitter, with hashtags like #JusticeForKiana and #AtlantaPD trending. News vans parked outside the hospital, reporters clamoring for a statement. Angela ignored them, but Malik pulled her aside. "Angie, people are angry. They want to help. You gotta say something." She shook her head. "I don't want cameras. I just want my daughter." But deep down, she knew this was bigger than her pain. Kiana's story was becoming a symbol, and Angela wasn't sure she was ready for what that meant. That afternoon, a young man in a suit approached her in the waiting room. "Ms. Harris, I'm Marcus Tate," he said, extending a hand. "I'm a lawyer with the Georgia Civil Rights Coalition. I saw what happened to your daughter, and I want to help you fight." No charge. Angela studied him, mid-20s, earnest, with a fire in his eyes that reminded her of Kiana. "Why?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, then said, "Because I lost my brother to something like this. I can't let it happen again." Angela nodded, her throat tight. "Okay. Tell me what we do." As the day ended, Angela stood by Kiana's bed, brushing a braid from her face. The hospital was quiet now, the visitors gone. She leaned close, whispering, "I'm gonna make this right, baby. They won't get away with this." Outside, Atlanta hummed with unrest, protests forming, voices rising. Angela didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. Her fight, Kiana's fight, was about to shake the city to its core. Angela Harris sat in the dim glow of the hospital room, her hand wrapped around Kiana's. The steady beep of the heart monitor the only sound breaking the silence. It had been 3 days since the police had left her daughter broken on a sidewalk. 3 days since Angela's world had collapsed. Kiana lay still, her face bruised and swollen, a breathing tube snaking from her mouth. The doctors said she was stable, but stable felt like a hollow word when Kiana's eyes stayed closed, her laughter silenced. Angela's scrubs were wrinkled, her braids loose from sleepless nights. She hadn't left the hospital since that first night. Couldn't bear the thought of Kiana waking up alone, outside. Atlanta was waking up to Kiana's story. The video, now with over 2 million views, had sparked protests across the city. Angela's phone buzzed incessantly, texts from neighbors, calls from reporters, notifications from strangers on Twitter tagging her with hashtag justice for Kiana. She ignored most of it, her focus locked on the rise and fall of Kiana's chest. But the world wouldn't let her grieve in peace. News vans lined the street outside Emory University Hospital, their cameras trained on the entrance like vultures circling. Angela had seen the headlines, teen in coma after police altercation, Atlanta PD under fire. Some outlets were kinder, calling Kiana a promising student, but others dug into her life, painting her as a troubled kid who'd provoked the officers. Angela's blood boiled at the lies, but she didn't have the energy to fight the media. Not yet. Her brother Malik was her anchor. He arrived each morning with coffee and a fierce determination to keep Angela standing. "You don't have to do this alone, Angie," he said, his voice low as he sat across from her in the ICU waiting room. His wife, Denise, was there too, organizing a rotation of friends to bring food and clothes so Angela wouldn't have to leave. Reverend Carter, their pastor, stopped by daily, offering prayers and a quiet strength that Angela clung to. But even their support couldn't dull the ache in her chest, the fear that Kiana might never wake up. On the 4th day, Marcus Tate, the young lawyer who'd promised to help, returned with a thick folder under his arm. He sat with Angela in the hospital cafeteria, the smell of stale coffee hanging in the air. "Ms. Harris, we've got a fight ahead," he said, spreading papers across the table. The police report claims Kiana was combative, that she reached for something in her backpack. But the video shows she had her hands up. "We need to build a case, and we need to move fast." Angela stared at him, her mind foggy. "What do they say she reached for?" she asked. Marcus hesitated. "They're implying it could have been a weapon. They didn't find one, but they're using it to justify the force." Angela's hands clenched into fists. "A weapon, my Kiana?" "She was carrying books, Marcus." "Books," Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. "I know. That's why we need witnesses, evidence, anything to counter their story." The bystander who filmed it, Jamal Carter, "No relation to your pastor, is a key piece. He's 16, lives in the West End. I've got his contact, but he's scared. Says the cops have been driving by his house." Angela's stomach twisted. She knew what that meant, the unspoken threat that hung over anyone who spoke out. "Can you get him to talk?" she asked. Marcus leaned forward, his voice steady. "I'll try, but we also need to look at the officers' records. If they've done this before, it could help." Angela felt a spark of hope, fragile but real. She'd spent her life trusting the system, working in it, raising Kiana to respect it, but now it felt like a machine built to crush her. Marcus was different. He was young, barely older than Kiana's teachers, but his eyes held a fire that reminded Angela of her daughter's passion for justice. "What do I do?" she asked. Marcus slid a notepad toward her. "Start writing down everything you remember about that night. Every detail about Kiana, who she is, what she was doing. We're telling her story, not theirs." Back in Kiana's room, Angela sat with the notepad, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she thought of Kiana at 5, twirling in a sundress, giggling as Angela braided her hair. At 12, winning her first debate competition, her voice sharp and confident. At 17, just weeks ago, sitting at their kitchen table, talking about Howard University and her dream of fighting for kids like her. Angela's tears fell onto the blank page. She whispered a prayer, not just for Kiana's recovery, but for the strength to face what was coming. The protests grew louder. On the 5th day, Justice Now, the activist group, organized a march from the hospital to Atlanta City Hall. Angela saw it on the news, hundreds of people carrying signs with Kiana's face, chanting her name. She didn't go, she couldn't leave Kiana, but Malik did, texting her updates. "Crowd's big, Angie. They're with you." Angela felt torn. Part of her wanted to join them, to scream her pain into the world, but another part felt exposed, like her grief was being turned into a spectacle. She turned off the TV when a pundit called Kiana a statistic, her hands shaking with rage. The hospital bills were piling up. Angela's insurance covered some of Kiana's care, but the ICU was expensive, and her savings were dwindling. Denise started a GoFundMe, and donations poured in from strangers across the country. Angela was grateful, but humiliated. She'd always prided herself on providing for Kiana without handouts. Now, she had no choice. She spent hours on the phone with the hospital's billing office, arguing over charges while Kiana lay motionless. Each call chipped away at her strength, but she kept going, because giving up wasn't an option. On the 6th day, the police department issued a statement. Angela read it on her phone, her heart sinking with every word. The Atlanta Police Department is cooperating fully with the investigation. The officers involved acted in accordance with protocol. When the suspect displayed aggressive behavior, we ask the public to refrain from judgment until all facts are presented. Aggressive behavior. The words felt like a slap. Angela wanted to march to the precinct and shove the video in their faces, but Marcus had warned her to stay calm, to let him handle the legal side. They want you to react, he'd said. Don't give them ammunition. That night, Tasha came by with a backpack full of Kiana's things from the library. She left this behind, Tasha said, her voice small. Inside were Kiana's textbooks, a half-eaten granola bar, and a notebook filled with her neat handwriting notes for a history project on the civil rights movement. Angela clutched the notebook, her fingers tracing Kiana's words. She could almost hear her daughter's voice, reading the notes aloud, her passion for justice shining through. She was going to change the world, Angela whispered. Tasha nodded, tears spilling. She still can, Ms. Angela. The next morning, Angela met Marcus at a coffee shop near the hospital. He looked exhausted, his tie loosened, but his focus was sharp. I reached out to Jamal, he said. He's willing to meet, but only somewhere private. He's terrified the cops will come after him. Angela nodded, understanding the fear all too well. What else? She asked. Marcus pulled out a laptop. I've been digging into the officers. The one who shoved Kiana, Officer Daniel Hayes, has 3 complaints against him for excessive force. None stuck, but it's a pattern. The other, Officer Michael Reed, is newer, but he's tight with Hayes. We need to prove they acted outside protocol. Angela listened, her mind racing. She'd never thought of herself as a fighter, not like this. She was a nurse, a mother, someone who fixed things quietly. But now, she felt a fire building inside her, fueled by Kiana's stillness, by the lies the police were spreading. What about the video? She asked. Marcus frowned. It's strong, but they're claiming it's incomplete, that it doesn't show the full context. We need Jamal's testimony to back it up, and we need to find out if there's body cam footage. As they spoke, Angela's phone lit up with a news alert. Atlanta PD releases statement on Kiana Harris. Case urges calm. The article quoted a police union representative defending Hayes and Reed, calling them dedicated officers protecting our city. Angela's hands shook as she showed Marcus. They're lying to everyone, she said. He nodded, his expression grim. That's why we're doing this, Ms. Harris. To tell the truth, that night, Angela stood by Kiana's bed, watching the monitors. The doctors had reduced her sedation, hoping she'd show signs of waking, but there was no change. Angela leaned close, her voice soft but fierce. I'm fighting for you, baby. I won't let them erase you. Outside, the city pulsed with anger protests, hashtags, candlelight vigils. Angela felt the weight of it all, the eyes of the world on her daughter, on her. She didn't know if she was ready, but she knew one thing, she wouldn't stop. Not until the truth came out, not until justice was served. The fight was just beginning, and Angela Harris was ready to carry it forward, no matter the cost. Angela Harris stood in the hospital hallway, her sneakers squeaking against the polished floor as she paced. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on her tired face. It had been 10 days since Kiana was brutalized by police. 10 days since Angela's life had become a blur of hospital rooms, sleepless nights, and a growing fire in her chest. Kiana was still in a coma, but the doctors had noticed small signs, her fingers twitching, her eyelids fluttering. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep Angela tethered to hope. She clung to it like a lifeline, even as the world outside grew louder, angrier, and more complicated. The viral video of Kiana's attack had exploded to 5 million views, and Atlanta was a powder keg. Protests swelled daily, with justice now leading marches through downtown, their chants of no justice, no peace echoing across the city. Angela hadn't joined them. She couldn't leave Kiana, but she felt their energy through Malik's updates and the constant stream of notifications on her phone. Strangers sent messages of support, calling her a warrior, a hero. Others sent hate, accusing her of exploiting her daughter's pain for attention. Angela deleted those without reading them, but each one stung. A reminder that Kiana's story was no longer just theirs. Marcus Tate, the young lawyer who'd become her ally, was working non-stop. He met Angela at the hospital every morning, his briefcase stuffed with notes and legal pads. Today, he sat across from her in the ICU waiting room, his tie undone, a cup of cold coffee in his hand. "We're making progress, Ms. Harris," he said, his voice steady but tired. "I met with Jamal Carter last night. He's scared, but he's willing to talk." He saw everything Hayes and Reed pulling up, hassling Kiana, twisting her arm before she even had a chance to explain herself. Angela's jaw tightened. "Will he testify?" Marcus hesitated. "He wants to, but his mom's worried about retaliation. Cops have been circling their block, shining lights into their windows at night." Angela's stomach churned. She knew that intimidation tactic, had heard stories from her neighbors in the West End. The police didn't need to say a word. Their presence was threat enough. "Can you protect him?" she asked. Marcus sighed. "I can try. We can keep his identity out of the public filings for now. But if this goes to trial, he'll have to go on record. He's a kid, Ms. Harris. He's terrified." Angela nodded, her eyes drifting to the window where rain streaked the glass. She thought of Kiana at 16, fearless in her debate tournaments, arguing for justice with a fire that made Angela proud. Now, another kid was risking everything to tell her truth. Marcus pulled out his laptop and opened a file. "I've been digging into Hayes and Reed. Daniel Hayes, the one who shoved Kiana, has a history. 3 complaints for excessive force in the last 5 years to black teenagers, 1 Latino man. All settled out of court, no charges. Reed's newer, but he's been cited for misconduct twice, both times with Hayes as his partner. They're a team, and they've got friends in high places." Angela's hands clenched. "Why are they still on the street?" Marcus shook his head. "The system protects its own. But we're going to use this. If we can show a pattern, it strengthens our case." Angela leaned back, her mind racing. She'd spent her life avoiding trouble, teaching Kiana to do the same. But now, trouble had found them, and there was no running from it. "What else do we need?" she asked. Marcus tapped his pen against the table. "Body cam footage. The department claims the cameras were malfunctioning, but I don't buy it. I've filed a request, but they're stalling. We also need to talk to Kiana's friends, anyone who saw her that night. And we need to keep the pressure on. Public support is our leverage." Angela nodded, but the weight of it all pressed down on her. She wasn't just fighting for Kiana. She was fighting a machine that seemed built to break her. That afternoon, Angela returned to Kiana's room. The nurses had turned her to prevent bedsores, and her face looked less swollen, though the bruises were still stark against her skin. Angela sat beside her, holding her hand, whispering stories about Kiana's childhood, her first bike ride, the time she snuck extra cookies and blamed Malik. "You're my fighter, baby," Angela said, her voice cracking. "You gotta come back to me." As she spoke, Kiana's fingers twitched again, stronger this time. Angela's heart leapt, and she pressed the call button. The nurse, a kind woman named Carla, checked the monitors. "It's a good sign," she said, smiling. "She's fighting in there." But the moment of hope was shattered that evening. Angela was in the cafeteria when Malik burst in, his face tight with anger. "Angie, you need to see this." He held up his phone, showing a news report. The Atlanta PD had released a new statement, claiming Kiana had a history of disruptive behavior at school and was known to be uncooperative with authority. The report cited an anonymous source and grainy photos of Kiana at a school protest last year holding a sign about racial justice flashed on the screen. Angela's vision blurred with rage. Disruptive? She was on the honor roll. She was protesting for kids who were getting suspended for nothing. Malik put a hand on her shoulder. They're trying to dirty her up, Angie. Don't let them get to you. She didn't want to, but the lies cut deep. Kiana wasn't perfect. She'd had her teenage moments, sneaking out once, talking back when she was moody, but she was a good kid, the kind who tutored younger students and read to kids at the library. Angela called Tasha, who confirmed the school protest was about unfair suspensions, not violence. They're twisting everything, Tasha said, her voice shaking. Kiana was trying to make things better. Angela thanked her, then hung up, her hands trembling. She wanted to scream, to march to the news station and set the record straight. But Marcus's words echoed, "Don't give them ammunition." That night, Angela's apartment was vandalized. She wasn't there. Denise had convinced her to go home for a shower, but a neighbor called at 2 a.m. Someone had spray-painted "Stop Lying" across her front door and smashed a window. Angela drove over, her heart pounding, and stood in the rain, staring at the red paint dripping down the wood. Malik arrived minutes later, his fists clenched. "This is them, Angie. They're trying to scare you." She nodded, her jaw tight. "They don't know me." She refused to let the police see her break. She called a friend to board up the window and stayed at Malik's that night, but sleep didn't come. The next morning, Reverend Carter organized a vigil outside the hospital. Hundreds showed up: church members, neighbors, students from Kiana's school. They lit candles, sang hymns, and held signs with Kiana's smiling face. Angela stood at the edge of the crowd, her hands clasped, feeling both lifted and overwhelmed. A young girl, maybe 12, approached her, holding a drawing of Kiana as an angel. "She's gonna be okay, Ms. Harris," the girl said. Angela knelt, hugging her, tears spilling. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. The vigil stretched into the night, and Angela felt a shift. She wasn't alone. The city was watching, and they were angry. Marcus called her later with news. "I got a lead on the body cam footage," he said. "A source in the department says it exists, but was flagged for review. I'm pushing for a court order to release it." Angela's heart raced. "What if they destroy it?" Marcus's voice was firm. "They won't. Too many eyes on this now. But we need to keep the pressure on. I'm setting up a meeting with Jamal tomorrow. You should come. It might help him feel safe." Angela agreed, though the thought of facing another scared kid made her chest ache. She'd spent her life protecting Kiana, and now she had to protect others too. As the day ended, Angela sat by Kiana's bed, reading from her daughter's history notebook. The words blurred as she spoke, her voice steady despite the tears. "You're my heart, Kiana," she said. "I'm building this case for you, for us." Outside, the protests grew louder, the city pulsing with demands for justice. Angela didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing: she was ready to fight, no matter how long it took, no matter what it cost. The truth was out there, and she would find it. Angela Harris stepped into the Fulton County Courthouse, her heart pounding like a drum against her ribs. The air was thick with tension. The hallway crowded with reporters, their cameras flashing like lightning in a storm. She wore a navy blazer Denise had pressed for her, Kiana's favorite color, and kept her head high, though her hands trembled at her sides. It had been 3 weeks since Kiana was attacked, and today was the first day of the trial against officers Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed. Angela had barely slept, her nights spent at Kiana's bedside, whispering promises of justice. Now, standing in the courthouse, she felt the weight of a city watching, waiting for her to carry her daughter's truth into that courtroom. The protests outside were deafening. Hundreds had gathered, organized by Justice Now, their voices rising in a chant. Justice for Kiana. No more silence. Signs with Kiana's face bobbed above the crowd, alongside others reading "End Police Brutality" and "Atlanta Demands Change." Angela caught glimpses of them march through the courthouse windows, a sea of people stretching down the street. Malik was out there, his deep voice leading a call and response, while Denise stayed close to Angela, squeezing her arm. "You got this, Angie," she whispered. Angela nodded, but her throat was tight. She wasn't sure she had anything, but for Kiana, she'd try. Inside the courtroom, the air was cooler, the wooden pews packed with spectators, community members, activists, and a few faces Angela didn't recognize. Marcus Tate sat at the plaintiff's table, his suit crisp, His expression focused as he arranged his notes. Across the room, Officers Hayes and Reed sat with their lawyers, their faces unreadable. Hayes, stocky with a buzz cut, stared straight ahead, while Reed, taller and younger, shifted in his seat. Angela's stomach twisted at the sight of them, the men who'd put her daughter in a hospital bed. She wanted to scream, but she sat silently, her hands clasped in her lap, as Marcus had instructed. The judge, a stern woman with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, banged her gavel. "Order in the court," she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. The trial began with opening statements. The defense attorney, a slick man named Gregory Vaughn, stood first, his tone smooth and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about officers doing their duty in a dangerous situation. Kiana Harris resisted arrest, displayed aggressive behavior, and forced Officers Hayes and Reed to act in self-defense. The evidence will show they followed protocol." Angela's nails dug into her palms. Lies, she thought, her eyes burning. Marcus rose, his voice steady but fierce. "This is about a 17-year-old girl, walking home from a study group, who was brutalized by two officers for no reason. Kiana Harris had her hands up, her ID out, and they attacked her. The video doesn't lie. The evidence doesn't lie. And we will prove that Officers Hayes and Reed acted with reckless disregard for her life." The jury, a mix of 12 men and women, listened intently, their faces unreadable. Angela studied them, searching for a sign of empathy, but found none. The prosecution called their first witness, a police sergeant who'd been on duty that night. He testified that Hayes and Reed reported Kiana as combative and claimed she'd reach for her backpack, suggesting a threat. Marcus cross-examined, his questions sharp. "Did you see the video, Sergeant? Did you see Kiana's hands raised? Did you see her pushed to the ground?" The sergeant stammered, admitting he hadn't reviewed the footage closely. Marcus pressed further, asking about the officer's history of complaints. But the judge sustained an objection from Vaughn. Angela felt a flicker of frustration. Marcus was fighting, but the system seemed to bend toward the officers. Then it was Angela's turn. She took the stand, her legs unsteady, and swore the oath. Marcus approached, his eyes kind but focused. "Ms. Harris, tell us about your daughter." Angela took a deep breath, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger. "Kiana's my everything. She's 17, a senior at Booker T. Washington High. She's got a 3.8 GPA, wants to be a lawyer to fight for kids like her. She's kind, funny, always helping others. That night, she was walking home from studying, like she did every week. She wasn't a threat. She was just my baby, trying to get home." Her voice broke, and she paused, wiping tears. The courtroom was silent, every eye on her. Vaughn's cross-examination was brutal. "Ms. Harris, isn't it true your daughter participated in protests at school? That she had a history of challenging authority?" Angela's jaw tightened. "She protested unfair suspensions. Kids getting punished for nothing. That's not challenging authority, that's standing up for what's right." Vaughn smirked, moving on to question her parenting, implying Kiana was out late because Angela wasn't strict enough. Angela held her ground, but each question felt like a knife, twisting the narrative against her daughter. The bystander video was played next. The courtroom screen showed the grainy footage, Kiana's voice ringing out, "I'm not doing anything wrong." The sound of her head hitting the pavement echoed, and Angela gripped Denise's hand, tears streaming. Jurors shifted uncomfortably, some looking away. Marcus used the moment to call Jamal Carter, the 16-year-old who'd recorded it. Jamal took the stand, his hands shaking, his eyes darting to the officers. "I saw them pull up," he said, his voice low. "Kiana wasn't doing nothing. She gave them her ID. Kept her hands up. They just grabbed her, threw her down." Vaughn tried to discredit him, calling him a troubled teen with a history of skipping school. But Jamal held firm, his voice breaking as he said, "She didn't deserve that." Outside, the protests grew louder, spilling into the evening news. Angela avoided the cameras, slipping out a side entrance with Malik and Denise. Back at the hospital, she found Kiana awake for the first time, her eyes half open, her voice a weak whisper. "Mama," she said, and Angela's heart leapt. She sat beside her, holding her hand, tears falling. "I'm here, baby," she said. But Kiana's memory was foggy. She didn't remember the attack, only flashes of lights and pain. The doctors warned it could take months for her to recover fully, if she ever did. Angela's hope soared, but it was tempered by the reality of Kiana's fragility. That night, Marcus called with a breakthrough. "I got a tip," he said, his voice urgent. "A former officer, James Keller, says he has information about Hayes and Rita cover-up in a previous case. He's willing to talk, but he's nervous. Says he's been blacklisted for speaking out before." Angela's pulse quickened. "Can he testify?" Marcus hesitated. "He's afraid of retaliation, but I'm working on it. If we can get him on the stand, it could change everything." Angela nodded, though he couldn't see her. "Do whatever it takes," she said. The trial stretched into the next day. The defense called a witness, a shop owner near the incident, who claimed Kiana had been acting suspicious that night, loitering near his store. Marcus tore into him, pointing out inconsistencies. Security footage showed Kiana simply walking past, her backpack slung over one shoulder. Angela watched the jury, praying they saw through the lies. But doubt lingered, a heavy weight in her chest. The system was fighting back, and it was relentless. At the hospital, Angela sat with Kiana, who was awake longer now, trying to speak. "Why, Mama?" she asked, her voice faint. Angela's heart broke. She had no answers, only promises. "We're fighting for you, baby. We're gonna make this right." Outside, the city roared protests. News reports, hashtags spreading like wildfire. Angela felt the pressure building, the stakes higher than ever. The trial was only beginning, and the truth was still out of reach, but Angela wasn't backing down. For Kiana, she'd face anything. Angela Harris sat in the cramped conference room of the Georgia Civil Rights Coalition, her hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. The air smelled of ink and old carpet, and the fluorescent lights flickered, casting shadows on the stacks of legal documents spread across the table. It was the fourth week of the trial against officers Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed, and Angela felt like she was holding her breath, waiting for the world to shift. Kiana was awake now, her voice weak but her spirit stubborn, fighting through the fog of her injuries. Angela lived for those moments. Kiana's faint smile, her hands squeezing back, but the courtroom was a different battle, one where truth seemed to bend under the weight of power. The trial had become a spectacle. Outside the Fulton County Courthouse, protests swelled, with thousands marching daily, their signs demanding justice for Kiana and an end to police brutality. News cameras followed Angela's every move, though she slipped through side exits to avoid them. The hashtag justice for Kiana trended globally, with celebrities and activists amplifying the cause. But Angela felt the pressure of those eyes, the expectation to be strong, to be a symbol. She wasn't a symbol, she was a mother, terrified and angry, fighting for her daughter's life and name. Marcus Tate, her lawyer, was a whirlwind of focus. He'd barely slept in weeks, his eyes red but sharp as he pored over case files. Today, he'd called Angela to the coalition's office with urgent news. "We've got a game changer," he said, his voice low as he closed the door. "James Keller, the former officer, is ready to testify. He says Hayes and Reed were involved in a cover-up 2 years ago. A black teenager, beaten during a traffic stop, case buried. Keller was there, saw it all. He's got details, maybe even documents." Angela's heart raced. Was he coming forward now? Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped. "Guilt. He quit the force after that incident. Says he can't stay silent anymore. But he's scared, says the department's been watching him." Angela nodded, her mind spinning. Keller's testimony could expose the officer's pattern of violence, maybe even crack the case open. But fear lingered. Retaliation was real. Her own apartment had been vandalized again, this time with a brick through her bedroom window. A note tied to it reading, "Back off." She hadn't told Kiana, who was starting physical therapy and struggling to walk again. Angela carried the weight alone, her nights haunted by the sound of Kiana's scream in that viral video, the crack of her head against the pavement. In the courtroom that morning, the atmosphere was electric. The judge's gavel echoed as James Keller took the stand, his hands steady, but his eyes darting to the gallery. He was in his late 30s, weary, with a faded scar on his cheek. Marcus approached, his questions precise. "Mr. Keller, can you describe what you witnessed on March 12, 2023, involving officers Hayes and Reed?" Keller swallowed, his voice low but clear. "I was their backup on a traffic stop. Kid was 16, black, pulled over for a broken taillight. Hayes got aggressive, yanked him out of the car. Reed held him down while Hayes hit him knees, fists, everything. Kid wasn't resisting, just crying for his mom." The courtroom was silent, jurors leaning forward. Angela gripped Denise's hand, her breath shallow. Keller continued, his voice gaining strength. "After, they told me to keep quiet. Said the kid was a troublemaker, that no one would believe him. They filed a false report, said he swung first. I went along with it, God forgive me, but I couldn't stay. I quit 6 months later." Marcus held up a document, a copy of the falsified report. "Is this the report you're referring to?" Keller nodded. Double quotes, "Yes. I kept a copy, just in case." The gallery murmured, and the judge banged her gavel. Angela felt a surge of hope, sharp and fragile. The defense attorney, Gregory Vaughn, pounced during cross-examination. "Mr. Keller, you're a disgruntled former employee, aren't you? Fired for insubordination, now seeking revenge." Keller's jaw tightened. "I wasn't fired. I quit because I couldn't stomach the lies." Vaughn smirked, digging into Keller's record, painting him as unreliable, a traitor to the badge. But Keller held firm, his voice steady. "I'm here because what they did was wrong. To that kid, to Kiana Harris, to others." Angela watched the jury, praying they saw his truth. The testimony shifted the trial's momentum. Outside, the protests roared louder, with news reports flashing breaking. Ex-officer exposes police cover-up. Social media erupted, with hashtag Kiana Harris trending alongside hashtag Atlanta PD corruption. Angela avoided the cameras, but the story was everywhere: CNN, MSNBC, even international outlets. She felt exposed, her pain laid bare, but the public's anger gave her strength. People were listening, demanding change, yet the backlash grew too. Online, trolls called her a liar, a race baiter, and worse, someone leaked her phone number, and her voicemail filled with threats. Malik wanted to hire security, but Angela refused. She wouldn't let fear stop her. At the hospital, Kiana was making progress. She could sit up now, her speech clearer, though her memory of the attack was still a blur. Angela sat with her, reading from her history notebook, trying to anchor her to the girl she'd been. "You're strong, baby," Angela said, brushing a braid from Kiana's face. Kiana's eyes, still heavy with pain, met hers. "They hurt me, Mama," she whispered. "Why?" Angela's throat tightened, but she kept her voice steady. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're fighting back. They can't hurt you anymore." Kiana nodded, her hand squeezing Angela's weakly. Those moments fueled Angela, reminding her why she was enduring the courtroom, the threats, the sleepless nights. Marcus uncovered another lead that evening. "A friend in the DA's office says there's a leaked memo," he told Angela over the phone. "It suggests Hayes tampered with evidence in Kiana's case, possibly the body cam footage. They marked it as corrupted, but it might still exist." Angela's pulse quickened. "Can we get it?" Marcus's voice was grim. "I'm trying, but the department's stonewalling. We need a court order, and even then, they might destroy it first." Angela closed her eyes, praying for strength. "Keep pushing, Marcus. We can't let them bury this." The next day, Angela spoke at a rally organized by Justice Now, her first public appearance. She stood on a makeshift stage in Centennial Olympic Park, thousands stretching before her, their signs glowing in the dusk. Her voice shook at first, but it grew stronger. "My daughter Kiana is fighting for her life because 2 officers decided she wasn't worth protecting. We're here to say enough. No more lies, no more cover-ups. We want justice." The crowd roared, their voices carrying her words into the night. For the first time, Angela felt like she wasn't just a mother, she was a voice for something bigger. But the backlash was swift. That night, her car tires were slashed outside Malik's house, where she'd been staying since the vandalism. A note tucked under the wiper read, "You're next." Angela's hands shook as she showed it to Malik, who called the police ironic. Given everything, the officer who responded was polite but dismissive, saying it was probably kids. Angela didn't believe it, and neither did Malik. "They're trying to break you," he said, his voice low. Angela nodded, her jaw tight. "They don't know who they're messing with." In court, Marcus kept the pressure on, presenting more evidence of Hayes' history, witness statements from past complaints. Though none had led to convictions, the defense countered with character witnesses, fellow officers praising Hayes and Reed as dedicated public servants. Angela watched the jury, searching for signs they saw through the facade. Some nodded at Marcus's arguments, others looked skeptical. The trial was a tug-of-war, and Angela felt every pull. Back at the hospital, Kiana took her first steps in physical therapy, her legs shaky but determined. Angela held her arm, tears streaming as Kiana gritted her teeth through the pain. "I'm gonna walk again, Mama," she said, her voice fierce. Angela smiled, her heart swelling. "I know you are, baby." That strength, that fire, was Kiana's, and it was Angela's too. The trial was far from over, but Keller's testimony and the leaked memo had shifted the tide. Angela felt that the truth was clawing its way out, and she wouldn't stop until it was free. Angela Harris stood in the hospital room, her hand resting on Kiana's shoulder as her daughter gripped the parallel bars in physical therapy. Kiana's legs trembled, but her jaw was set, her eyes fierce with determination. "One more step, baby," Angela whispered, her voice thick with pride. Kiana nodded, sweat beading on her forehead, and took a shaky step forward, her first unassisted stride since the attack 6 weeks ago. The therapist, a kind woman named Lena, clapped softly. "You're a warrior, Kiana," she said. Angela's heart swelled, but the weight of the trial loomed heavy. Today was the day the jury would deliver their verdict, and Angela felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting to fall or fly. The Fulton County Courthouse was a fortress of noise and tension. Outside, thousands gathered, their chance of justice for Kiana vibrating through the humid Atlanta air. News vans lined the street, reporters shouting questions as Angela slipped through a side entrance. Flanked by Malik and Denise, the protests had grown into a movement, with #Justice for Kiana trending worldwide and vigils held in cities from New York to Los Angeles. Angela felt the weight of those voices, their hope and anger fueling her, but also their expectation. She wasn't just fighting for Kiana anymore, she was fighting for every mother who'd lost a child to the system, every kid who'd been judged before they had a chance. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. The wooden pews were packed, community members, activists, and strangers who'd followed the case online. Marcus Tate sat at the plaintiff's table, his suit slightly wrinkled from sleepless nights, his eyes scanning the jury as they filed in. Officers Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed sat across the room, their faces stoic, though Reed's hands fidgeted under the table. Angela studied them, her stomach twisting. Hayes, the one who'd shoved Kiana to the ground, met her gaze for a moment, his eyes cold. She looked away, focusing on Marcus, who gave her a small nod. They'd done everything they could. James Keller's testimony, the bystander video, the leaked memo suggesting evidence tampering. Now, it was up to the jury. The judge, her face stern, called for order. As the jury reached a verdict, she asked. The foreperson, a middle-aged black woman with glasses, stood. "We have, Your Honor." Angela's breath caught, her hands gripping Denise's so tightly her knuckles ached. The foreperson handed a folded paper to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. The room was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the air conditioning and the distant chants outside. Angela closed her eyes, praying, her lips moving silently. "Please, Lord, let them see the truth." The judge read the verdict aloud. On the charge of excessive force against Officer Daniel Hayes, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of excessive force against Officer Michael Reed, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of falsifying a police report, we find both defendants guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault, we find both defendants not guilty. The courtroom erupted gasps, cheers, and angry murmurs. Angela's eyes snapped open, her heart a tangled mix of relief and frustration. Guilty on some charges, but not all. It was a victory, but not the full justice she'd dreamed of. Hayes and Reed's faces remained blank, though Reed's shoulders slumped slightly. Vaughn, their lawyer, whispered something to them, his expression grim. Marcus turned to Angela, his voice low. "It's not everything, but it's a start. Guilty on excessive force and falsifying reports, that's serious. They'll face jail time, and it sets a precedent." Angela nodded, her throat tight. She wanted to feel triumphant, but the not guilty on aggravated assault stung. It felt like the system was still protecting its own, giving her just enough to quiet the protests, but not enough to heal her daughter's scars. Denise hugged her, tears streaming. "You did it, Angie. Kiana's gonna know they didn't get away with it." Outside, the crowd roared as news of the verdict spread. Some cheered, others shouted in anger, demanding harsher consequences. Angela stayed inside, avoiding the cameras. She needed to get back to Kiana, to tell her they'd won something, even if it wasn't everything. Marcus pulled her aside before she left. "We're not done," he said. "The department's under pressure now. That memo about the body cam footage, I'm filing an appeal to get it released. And we can push for a civil suit, hit them where it hurts." Angela nodded, her resolve hardening. "Do it," she said. For Kiana. At the hospital, Angela found Kiana sitting up, her eyes brighter than they'd been in weeks. The physical therapy was working. She could walk a few steps now, though her left arm was still weak from the fracture. Angela sat beside her, taking her hand. "Baby, we got a verdict," she said, her voice steady. "The officers are guilty on some charges. They're going to jail." Kiana's eyes widened, and for the first time since the attack, she spoke a full sentence, her voice hoarse but clear. "They can't hurt anyone else now, right, Mama?" Angela's tears fell, but she smiled. "Not like they hurt you, baby. We're making sure of it." Kiana's words lit a fire in Angela. She thought back to the trial, to the moments that had carried her through. The video of Kiana's attack, played over and over, had seared itself into her mind. But it had also swayed the jury. James Keller's testimony had exposed the department's rot, and Jamal Carter's courage on the stand had given the video weight. The leaked memo, though not admitted as evidence, had shifted public perception, forcing the city to act. Angela remembered her own testimony, her voice breaking as she described Kiana's dreams. Her kindness. She'd poured her heart into that courtroom, and it had mattered. But the partial victory gnawed at her. That night, at Malik's Hauser apartment, still unsafe after the vandalism, Angela sat with her brother, Denise, and Reverend Carter. The TV played news coverage of the verdict, pundits debating whether it was a win for justice or a compromise. Malik turned it off, his face tight. "They let them off too easy," he said. Angela nodded, but her mind was on Kiana's question. They can't hurt anyone else now, right? She wanted to believe it, but she knew the system was bigger than two officers. Hayes and Reed were guilty, but others like them were still out there. Reverend Carter took her hand. "You've done something powerful, Angela. You've shown this city what's possible when we fight together." Kiana's story is waking people up. Angela managed a small smile, but her heart was heavy. She thought of the threats, the brick through her window, the slashed tires, the hateful voicemails. The fight had cost her privacy, her safety, maybe even her faith in the world. But it had also shown her strength she didn't know she had, and it had given Kiana a chance to heal. The next day, Angela visited Kiana, bringing her favorite strawberry smoothie. Kiana sipped it slowly, her eyes following Angela as she spoke about the trial. "Mama, I want to help," Kiana said, her voice stronger now. "When I'm better, I want to fight too." Angela's chest tightened with pride and pain. She saw the fire in Kiana's eyes, the same fire that had carried her through debate tournaments and school protests. "You will, baby," Angela said. "We'll do it together." That evening, Justice now held a rally outside City Hall. Angela didn't speak this time. She wasn't ready, but she stood in the crowd, watching as young activists took the stage, their voices echoing Kiana's name. The city was changing, slowly, painfully. The verdict wasn't the end. It was a crack in the system, a glimpse of what could be. Angela thought of the civil suit Marcus was preparing, the body cam footage they still hoped to uncover. She thought of Kiana, walking again, dreaming again. The fight wasn't over, but for the first time, Angela felt like they might win. Back at the hospital, Angela sat by Kiana's bed, reading from her daughter's history notebook. The words, written in Kiana's neat handwriting, were about the civil rights movement, about people who'd fought against impossible odds. Angela paused, her voice soft. "You're part of this now, Kiana. Your story's changing things." Kiana's hand squeezed hers, and Angela knew, no matter what came next, they'd face it together. The verdict was a step, but the road was long, and Angela was ready to walk it for Kiana, for justice, for a world where no mother had to feel this pain. Angela Harris stood at the edge of a small stage in Atlanta's Piedmont Park, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the crowd, thousands strong, their faces a mosaic of hope, anger, and resolve. Banners waved above them, some with Kiana's smiling face, others reading "Justice for All" and "No More Silence." It was 3 months after the trial, and Angela was here to launch the Kiana Harris Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to supporting victims of police violence. Kiana stood beside her, leaning on a cane, her braids neat again, her eyes bright with a fire that hadn't dimmed despite everything. Angela took a deep breath, her voice carrying through the microphone. "This isn't the end," she said. "It's the beginning. For my daughter, for your children, for every life stolen or broken, we will keep fighting." The crowd erupted, their cheers a wave that lifted Angela's heart. The trial's verdict had been a bittersweet victory. Officers Daniel Hayes and Michael Reed were sentenced to 3 years for excessive force and falsifying reports. A punishment Angela felt was too light, but a start nonetheless. The not guilty verdict on aggravated assault still stung, a reminder that the system bent toward mercy for its own. But the case had shaken Atlanta. The leaked memo about tampered body cam footage, though never admitted in court, had sparked investigations into the police department. 2 supervisors resigned, and the city council was debating reforms. Angela knew change was slow, but she saw cracks in the wall, and she was determined to widen them. Kiana's recovery was a miracle Angela thanked God for every day. She could walk now, though her left arm remained weak, and her memory of the attack was still patchy. She'd started community college, taking online classes in pre-law, her dream of becoming a civil rights lawyer stronger than ever. Angela watched her daughter with awe. Kiana's spirit was unbroken, her voice growing louder. At home, they'd turned their kitchen table into a planning hub for the foundation. Kiana sketched logos while Angela drafted grant applications, their laughter filling the apartment for the first time in months. It wasn't the life they'd planned, but it was theirs, and they were building it together. The foundation's launch had drawn national attention. Activists from across the country flew in, and local leaders packed the park. Reverend Carter opened the event with a prayer, his deep voice echoing over the crowd. "We are here to honor Kiana, to lift up Angela, and to demand a world where no mother fears for her child's life." Angela felt tears prick her eyes, but she held them back. She'd cried enough. Today was about strength, about legacy. Malik and Denise stood in the front row, their faces proud. Marcus Tate was there too, his suit swapped for a casual jacket, his smile weary but genuine. He'd become family, his fight for Kiana as fierce as Angela's. The past months hadn't been easy. Threats continued, anonymous calls, hateful letters, even a slashed tire on Malik's truck. Angela had installed security cameras at her new apartment, a small place in a safer part of the West End. The vandalism had stopped, but the fear lingered, a shadow she refused to let define her. The community had her back. Neighbors brought meals, kids from Kiana's school volunteered for the foundation, and Justice Now organized safety patrols. Angela felt their love like armor, protecting her as she stepped into this new role. Kiana spoke next, her voice soft but steady, amplified by the microphone. "I don't remember everything from that night," she said, gripping her cane. "But I remember my mama's voice, telling me to keep fighting. I'm here because of her, because of all of you." The crowd cheered, and Angela squeezed Kiana's hand, her heart swelling. Kiana continued, her words gaining strength. "This foundation is for kids like me, who just want to live, to dream, to be free. We're not stopping until things change." The applause was thunderous, and Angela saw tears in the eyes of strangers, their hands raised in solidarity. After the speeches, Angela and Kiana cut a ribbon to officially launch the foundation. Volunteers handed out flyers detailing their mission: legal aid for victims, community education, and advocacy for police reform. Donations poured in, small contributions from locals, larger ones from national groups. Angela had been overwhelmed by the support, but she channeled it into action. She'd testified before the Georgia State Senate last week, her voice unwavering as she called for body cam mandates and independent oversight. Lawmakers listened, some nodding, others skeptical, but Angela didn't care about their doubts. She'd learned to keep pushing, no matter the odds. Back at home that night, Angela and Kiana sat on their couch, a laptop open to the foundation's website. Tasha, Kiana's best friend, had designed it, her tech skills turning their vision into something sleek and powerful. The site featured Kiana's story, a timeline of the case, and a call to action. Angela scrolled through the donation page, her eyes widening at the total over $50,000 in one day. "Look at this, baby," she said, showing Kiana. Her daughter smiled, her eyes tired but bright. "We're doing it, Mama." "For real," Angela hugged her, careful not to jostle her still healing arm. "We are, sweetheart." The trial's aftermath hadn't been tidy. Hayes and Reed were appealing their convictions, their lawyers arguing procedural errors. Marcus was ready to fight, filing motions to ensure the body cam footage, still unreleased, saw the light of day. Angela knew the legal battle wasn't over, but she felt stronger now, buoyed by Kiana's recovery and the community's support. She'd started meeting with other mothers who'd lost children to police violence, their stories breaking her heart but fueling her resolve. The foundation was their voice too, a way to honor the fallen while fighting for the living. Angela's days were full: hospital visits for Kiana's therapy, meetings with Marcus, calls with donors. She'd taken a leave from her nursing job, her savings stretched thin, but the foundation's funds covered Kiana's medical bills, easing one burden. At night, she'd sit with Kiana, reading from her history notebook or watching old debate videos, laughing at Kiana's dramatic gestures. Those moments were healing, stitching their lives back together. Angela thought of the girl Kiana had been twirling in sundresses, dreaming big, and the woman she was becoming, fierce and unbroken. The city was changing too. Atlanta's mayor announced a task force on police reform, citing Kiana's case as a catalyst. Community groups, inspired by the foundation, launched their own initiatives: youth programs, legal clinics, even a mural of Kiana downtown, her face painted with wings. Angela drove by it one evening, tears streaming as she saw kids taking selfies in front of it, their laughter a reminder of what they were fighting for. But the backlash persisted. Some officers publicly criticized the verdict, and online trolls targeted the foundation's social media. Angela ignored them, focusing on the work ahead. As the weeks passed, Angela and Kiana planned their next steps. Kiana wanted to speak at schools, sharing her story to inspire kids. Angela was working on a national campaign, connecting with activists in other cities. They'd already helped one family file a lawsuit, their legal fees covered by the foundation. Angela felt a purpose she'd never known, a fire that burned brighter than her fear. She thought of her own mother, who'd raised her through tough times, teaching her to stand tall. Now, Angela was passing that strength to Kiana, and through her, to others. One evening, Angela stood before a crowd at a church fundraiser, her voice clear and strong. "This foundation is Kiana's legacy, but it's yours too," she said. "We're building a world where our kids can walk home without fear, where justice isn't a dream but a reality." The crowd stood, clapping, their faces lit with hope. Kiana, seated in the front row, smiled, her cane resting beside her. Angela met her daughter's eyes, feeling a connection deeper than words. Later, at home, Angela tucked Kiana into bed, a ritual they'd kept even now that Kiana was 19. "I'm proud of you, Mama," Kiana said, her voice soft. Angela's tears fell, but she smiled. "I'm proud of you, baby. You're my heart." As Kiana slept, Angela sat by the window, looking out at Atlanta's skyline. The city was still flawed, still hurting, but it was hers, and she'd fight for it. The Kiana Harris Foundation was just the start, a beacon for change, a promise kept. Angela closed her eyes, her heart full, ready for whatever came next.